For decades, if you were a creative professional, you basically spoke one language: Adobe, Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro. These weren't just tools, they were the very words of your industry. But right now, the undisputed king is facing a huge crisis. For the first time in a very long time, the empire is starting to crack, and honestly, its future looks more uncertain than ever.
Wow. I mean, that quote from a longtime user, it really hits you, right? It perfectly captures this feeling that's been bubbling up in the creative world. The company that literally empowered a generation of artists is now seen as the thing holding them back. So how in the world did we get here? How did the partner become the obstacle? Well, to understand that, we've got to go back to the beginning.
You have to remember, before Adobe was this massive global giant, it was a revolutionary startup. It didn't just sell software. It built the entire digital playground that designers, photographers, and filmmakers have been living in for decades.
And man, just look at this timeline. It's a blur of pure dominance. In '87, Illustrator brought the designer's entire desk onto the computer. By '89, Photoshop was so huge it wasn't just a program, it became something you do to a photo. Then they invent the PDF, buy After Effects, and make that massive deal for Macromedia. Their strategy was simple and kind of ruthless. Either build the best tool for the job or just buy it.
And all of that led to this number, 70%.
By 2014, Adobe controlled 70% of the professional creative software market. That's not just market share, that's an iron grip. Think about that. It's like one company owning pretty much every professional camera, paintbrush, and editing suite on the planet. It was a monopoly in everything but name. And when you have that kind of power with no real competition, well, you can do whatever you want. And that's when they made a decision that would change absolutely everything. So what was that big move? Well, in 2013, Adobe took a massive gamble. They decided to stop selling you software and start, well, renting it to you. This was the subscription gamble, a move that was, at the same time, both financially brilliant and, for its most loyal users, deeply, deeply hated.
Okay, so let's break this down. The old way, you'd shell out a ton of cash up front, maybe a couple grand. But boom, you owned that copy of Photoshop forever. For Adobe, though, their income was all over the place, totally dependent on big new releases. But the new way, the Creative Cloud, it's a much smaller monthly fee. You always get the latest version, which sounds great, right? But for Adobe, it turned that lumpy income into a predictable, non-stop river of cash. And that's the key right there. They chose that predictable revenue over the idea of you actually owning your tools. And that trade-off, well, it secured their financial future, but started to destroy decades of trust.
And for the pros, for the people whose entire careers were built on these tools, it didn't feel like a choice at all. It felt like a trap. This user's quote, digital heroin, it's harsh, but it really gets to the feeling. You could no longer just buy the industry standard software. You are now forced to pay a subscription, forever, just to be able to do your job. So while the creative community was fuming, Wall Street, they were popping champagne. This chart tells you everything you need to know. Adobe's value exploded from $16 billion to over $200 billion. From a business perspective, the strategy was an absolute masterpiece. But here's the thing about giants. Sometimes they're so busy looking up at their own success, they don't notice the little thing at their feet that's about to trip them up.
And that's exactly what happened. See, Adobe was so laser-focused on its high-end professional market that it completely ignored millions of people who just needed to make, a quick, simple graphic. And into that massive blind spot stepped a little startup from Australia.
Canva's strategy was just brilliant. They weren't trying to build another Photoshop, no way. They built something for everyone else. The marketing intern, the small business owner, the teacher, anyone who needed to create something that looked good, fast, without needing a 4-year design degree to do it.
And boy, did it work. By the end of 2014, they had 750,000 users. Now, that sounds like a lot, but to a behemoth like Adobe, it was nothing. A blip. A cute little tool for amateurs. And it was a threat they completely and fatally underestimated.
Okay, so now let's fast forward to today. That cute little tool now has 170 million monthly users. Let that number sink in for a second. That's not just a disruption, it's a whole new paradigm. Canva didn't just find a new market, it created one. And then it started coming for Adobe's territory.
In early 2024, Canva dropped a bombshell. It bought the Affinity Suite. Now, if you're a designer, you know Affinity. It's the go-to professional alternative to Adobe. This was a direct shot across the bow. The message was crystal clear. Canva isn't just for amateurs anymore. They're coming for the pros. so.
At the exact same time that Canva is on this meteoric rise, things at Adobe are starting to look shaky. The fortress it spent decades building started to show some serious cracks, and a lot of them, well, they were self-inflicted.
The frustration among their core users just started to boil over. The tools they depended on became slow, bloated, resource-hungry behemoths. Updates were focused on flashy AI features that felt half-baked, while long-standing bugs that crippled professional workflows were just ignored. On top of all that, things like aggressive cancellation fees and confusing terms of service, it just felt hostile. All that goodwill they'd built up for decades was just evaporating. So, feeling the heat, Adobe went back to its old playbook. If you can't beat them, buy them. They tried to acquire their biggest competitor in the UI/UX design space, Figma, for a jaw-dropping $20 billion. It was a clear and frankly pretty desperate attempt to just eliminate a threat. And it completely fell apart. Regulators all over the globe saw it for what it was, a blatant anti-competitive move, and they blocked it. The deal was dead. It was a massive and very public blow to Adobe's whole strategy.
So what was the fallout? Well, you can see it was a huge win for design competitors everywhere, and of course for Figma's independence. But for Adobe, it was a total strategic disaster. Their plan to just buy their way out of trouble was officially dead in the water. Which brings us right up to today. Adobe is now fighting a war on two fronts. On the outside, you have these hungry new competitors, and on the inside, you have the growing anger of their own core users. And right at the center of this whole battle is the next big disruption, AI. And this comment from Reddit really sums up how a lot of creatives feel. They see Adobe frantically shoving AI into all their products, and they feel like it's just making their main tools buggier and less reliable. For them, it feels like a solution in search of a problem.
But, and this is a huge but, while individual creators are skeptical, Adobe's giant corporate customers love the AI. You got executives from IBM saying it's cutting their costs by 80% and speeding up work from weeks to days. And this right here is the core attention for Adobe today. Who are they actually building for? The individual artist or the corporate machine? And this number reveals just how nervous the market is. In early 2024, Adobe stock dropped by a staggering 26%. So even with big companies adopting their AI, investors are clearly spooked by the combination of new competition and all this user unhappiness. So it all leaves us with this one big question. For decades, Adobe's integrated ecosystem was its greatest strength. It was a fortress that kept users in and competitors out. But now, as the walls start to crack and new doors are opening up all over the place, you really have to wonder, is it still a fortress that can't be breached? Or has it finally become a prison that its users are figuring out how to escape?